Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is having a lovely evening. I hope everyone is having a lovely evening. Everyone is having a lovely evening. Everyone is having a lovely evening. Twy, good to see you. Twy, good to see you. Yeah, it's kind of hard to be first when Manda's around because Manda parks in sometime around, I don't know, noon. Manda, good to see you. Fraley, good to see you, sir. It was great to see you both over actually all three of you over the weekend. Natasha, good to see you here. Natasha, welcome. I am flying solo tonight, so you're all just stuck with me. So hopefully we can have a little fun. Give people a couple more minutes to start filing in. I think I managed to get you hearing echo. Anyone else hearing echo? Oh, you know something? Hold on. How about now? Oh, okay. You know something? Yeah, I decided for once not to wear headphones, and because I realized that I wouldn't be talking to anyone, so I kind of like didn't need to, um, you know, since I wasn't talking to anyone, I didn't need to hear anyone, and that's how. Thankfully, you're all there and listening, because that's how I figured out that I hadn't muted the tab. All right. Well, so why don't we just kick this into the stream and let's get this show on the road? So what are we discussing today? Well, that was a little cheap view. Cameron, good to see you. Vantalord, good to see you and all of your puns. Tab, that's a very old soda. You know what the one thing about Tab was? Even when you drank a fresh one, it still tasted like old soda. I do not miss Tab at all. And again, I never was one much for diet sodas anyway, so Tab was just like the worst of them. So anyway, I hope everyone is having a good Wednesday evening. It's a little rainy here, but can't dampen the mood because hey, no, it wasn't like wax lips candy. I like wax lips candy. I don't know why, but it that at least was fun. I got to see many of you over the weekend at Blue Box Con down in Tennessee. I don't know about you, how everybody else's trip home was. It was 13 and a half hour drive for me, which was really good. It probably would have been a lot shorter if I hadn't done such a great job of staying hydrated. Now, on the plus side, staying hydrated is a wonderful thing. On the con side, it does require a couple of extra stops that I hadn't planned for. Oh, your back is still sore. That's not good. Bill, great to see you, sir. I'm sorry to hear that's why. Haven't been there in 40 years, and John's destroyed half of it. Well, yeah. So we're going to talk about, this is going to be a discussion of the Village of Hommlet, PJ, pre-John, because it is one of the more interesting places. It's probably, for my money, it is one of the best modules ever released. I know that Jay, or Lord Gazumba has the Temple of Elemental Evil, which includes the Village of Hommlet, up on at number one on his list. I'm a lot bigger fan of the village itself than I am of the overall temple. And when I say the Temple of, I'm talking the Temple of Elemental Evil, such as seen here. Also, kind of seen if you've been a member of Friday Night Crusades for a while now. The party has made their way through Hommlet. They've made their way through one of the adjoining towns, and they've also made their way into the temple itself. That's something, Pat. It's a great thing to do. We will definitely get to the moat house. So let's start. Let's start with a quick poll. Amanda, can you do a quick poll for me? I like a poll to know how many of you have either run a game in Hommlet or either run or played or both a game that took place in the village of Hommlet. Doesn't matter whether it's in classic time or John's time or whenever it was in the actual calendar. And while she's getting that set up, you ran the temple. So you did the temple itself, but not. Well, you've actually also done you've also played in the village, Banda. Oh. Well, in that case, hi, Mike. Yeah, I kind of figured that out. Dr. Freud Jr., you feel old. I feel old. I had this as a kid and I'm still running it today. Ran through the temple, full speed, eyes closed. That's, that might be a way to do it. All right, the poll is up. So let's go start taking a look at the village of Hommlet and see if we can decipher some of the things that makes this an interesting location. One thing you note is you start off with this this lovely little map. Now, one of the things that makes Hommlet kind of interesting, just for starters, is its location. It's not all that far from several cities. It really, honestly, and it's on the western part of the map. It's not all that far from the city of Greyhawk, the city of Divers, the city of Verbobonk, some of the good kingdoms. It's good, John. Glad you were able to drop in. And once again, thank you and Jenny for hosting us this weekend. The zaniness that happens when the Mad Shatters descend upon Murfreesboro. So it's already in kind of a central location. It's so there is a lot of stuff around, which may or may not play into the session itself, or depending on whether or not you start there. But say you decide to have characters, starting characters who are from elsewhere. There is a lot to choose from just in that area for character backstories for them being from elsewhere. Um, yeah. So in that case, there's plenty to choose from. I mean, it makes it for a good central location. And one of the nice things is, this is a module. It's a starter module. It's when I say starter module, I mean for low levels. You can start in the village of Hommlet at level 1. So we've got 3 and 3, and something that occurs to me that I put the poll. I asked for the poll, and I did not vote. So we'll go 4-3 on that one. In favor of those who have, in favor of those who have, played or run in Hommlet. As a matter of fact, as many times as I've run it in the last 5 months, I can probably double that number if I counted each time. Sean, good to see you, sir. Great to see you this weekend. Glad to see you dropping into channel 5. All right, there we go. So there are a few of you who have not been here before. Um, and here, while we're doing this, if you've got things about this, either playing or running the Village of Hommlet, please share your experiences, the things that you liked, the things you had questions about, possibly. Uh, I give us topics or things that we can talk about. So, I have I'd like to know where what your thoughts on this are for those of you who have been there, and so that it's not just me talking about my favorite things or the things I find interesting about the place. So we have the map, and for those of you who started with Blue Box with Greyhawk Adventures, um, book one, uh, one portion of this map should be very, 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 um, well known, and that would be not quite dead center, maybe slightly off center to the left and down a bit, is the Inn of the Welcome Wench. Probably one of the more famous taverns in all of D&D. Greyhawk Awakening. What did I say, Amanda? I'm still a little road lag, so if I didn't say Greyhawk Awakening, Greyhawk Adventure. Okay, yeah, well, Greyhawk Adventures, Greyhawk Awakening, Adventures in Greyhawk. Well, the world of Greyhawk. Those of you who are familiar with the Inn of the Welcome Wench, and the Inn of the Welcome Wench is kind of interesting because this is an inn in the adventure that has its own section. Starting on page 8, it goes into great detail with you have the prices for everything in the inn, plain breakfast and elaborate breakfast. Same thing for dinner, supper, cost of beer, ale, mead. Ulek elixir, an Ulek elixir, which is apparently a liqueur. So lots of interesting stuff here, just in the terms of details on the pricing. It's also an interesting in that it has multiple levels, 2 floors, a cellar with multiple rooms in it, and of course the one of the more famous innkeepers, or at least for those of you, actually probably one of the few places where people can actually name the innkeeper, that being Oscar Gundergut, who unfortunately did not meet with the best of fates in Greyhawk Awakening Book 1. So, for starters, if you're going to have a, the go with the cliche, or well, I mean, it's maybe cliche kind of has a negative connotation to it, but the trope as far as adventurers and a campaign starting in an inn or a pub or bar or whatever you want to call it, you could do a heck of a lot worse than the Inn of the Welcome Wench, that's for sure. Now, going back to the map for a second, there's a couple things that I do want to draw attention to. And it would help if I was actually on the screen that had the map. So, one thing that you note is that there are a lot of businesses that are detailed, and some of these were, played by members of the Mad Shatters in what we call it, in Greyhawk Awakening. But you note that for a village, there are quite a few businesses. There is a brewer, there is a potter, a jewels and money changer. Basically, everything that you could possibly need uh, for a party to do business, for a party to engage in commerce, do something with their wealth. Unfortunately, poor Federer was another one who didn't make it. I'm sorry, Pat. But, there's a blacksmith. I mean, all the things that you could possibly need, they thought to put there so that you could really make this, unlike some places where it was kind of up to the DM to fill in the blanks. There are all the things that you could possibly need for a party to really, really make this a base of operations. Now, beyond that, Kai Hawkeye, thank you so much for the resubscription. It was good to meet you and see you this past weekend. I'm glad you were able to make it, and I'm glad you're here this evening. So now the one thing that I would note is that if you look at the town, what's clear is the village itself is a lot more, or the village proper is a lot more about the businesses, with the assumption being that the farmers and the people who live in the town, with the exception of those who, work the various businesses, would live outside of town. They would be part of farms or little homesteads on the road to Hommlet. And you can kind of see that in the map, like in the lower left-hand corner, you've got two farmers on the roads coming in from the, the west or southwest, as it were. And it kind of brings to the idea that Hommlet is a bit of a happening place. It's a center of, a bit of a center of commerce, which again, when we talk about the fact that it, where it's located in the world of Greyhawk and how there are so many things that are relatively close by, being close in an age where most of the travel is either done on foot or if you're lucky by either, via some kind of mount or at least some kind of cart drawn by horses or some other animal. It's makes for an interesting location in that, it is a bit of a center of commerce. One thing that you might note is that there is a trader building up on the north side. And between that and the jewels and money changer kind of speaks to the fact that this is a place where you can do some business and make for a nice start of a campaign, make for a nice base of operations. One of the things that I really, really found interesting when I first looked at the map, and I don't think I noticed it at first. Those of you, again, who have been following Greyhawk Awakening since book one, we all know of the famous druid Jaru. What's interesting is the fact that Jaru's grove is right off the center of town. You normally would think of druids might be a little off on their own, but in the village of Hommlet, there is, there's a bit of tension going on, and not necessarily just forces of good and evil pulling at each other. The fact that there is the moat house nearby. If you're playing this during the classic 576 common year period, there's different activity. There's problems with bandits on the road and all kinds of other other things that you would expect to trouble a village of this this location, this stature, and so on. But what you might note is the fact that you do have a druid, and on the northern side of the town, you have the Church of St. Cuthbert. Why is this important? Well, for starters, the Church of St. Cuthbert there is actually kind of new. Let's go see if we can find the location for it. And do they actually describe it? So it's a relatively recent edition, and I forgot to figure out. I thought it was in the description of the church itself, but apparently not. Jeru is more than just a druid. He is he's a druid of the old faith, as the druids would be. But uh, it if you look at the description of the various townsfolk, and if you as far as like all the buildings within Hommlet, it'll mention whether or not they're members of the old faith, or if they're believers in Saint Cuthbert. So there's a little bit of a power struggle going on there. How much you want to play that up is kind of up to you, but it should note, and it is not necessarily. When I say power struggle, I'm not necessarily saying that there's fights, but it can lead. You can play it up to having a bit of tension between those who believe in the old faith and those who are um, kind of going with the new guy in town, relatively speaking. So it also doesn't help that the canoness, who is normally the head of the Church of Saint Cuthbert in Hommlet, has gone elsewhere. And if you are actually playing the full Temple of Elemental Evil module, you understand where she is and what it is she's doing. But the guy that they leave behind, a guy by the name of Turjan, is well, he's definitely interested in converts. He's also interested in gold for helping continue work on the temple. So maybe a little bit of stress there, maybe a little bit of tension, something to play with. Um, I'm curious, to those of you, how many has anyone here actually run the village of Hommlet and done anything with that tension? I don't think we need a poll for it. You can say yes, no, didn't notice it, or and even if you were just a player and it came up within your games, I'd be interested in hearing about that too. Oh, and Antiquitas and Hagar the Horrible, good to see the both of you. Thank you for dropping in. We are discussing the village of Hommlet, and I am flying solo this evening, so please, any thoughts anyone has or any questions that anyone has on the village itself, uh, do feel to drop in. So I have a question for those of you who didn't go into any of those details or played in it and didn't the DM didn't. How many of you felt like you ended up rushing from the village to the moat house? Because I mean that is kind of where you end up. I think that's one of the as a DM, especially if you're doing depending on what kind of game you're running. I think it's one of the harder things to do because you know that there's this moat house nearby and you want to run them through it, but there's just so much here that the temptation to just get on with it can be a little rough. Okay, yeah, hey Moose, that's fair. That's kind of what I can certainly see that. And to be fair, it kind of it doesn't go into great detail about it. Just the fact that there are there is some competition for followers there. Lots of little side quests before heading to the moat house. Certainly not a bad idea, especially so that you can better survive what awaits you at the moat when you first try to get into the moat house. Those of you who've had characters swallowed whole know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's certainly doing side quests is a thing. You also have an interesting cast of characters here. We already mentioned Osler. There is a couple others. I mean, there's Giroux, there is Turjan. And I always remember his brother's name, but let me see. It's gonna drive me a little nuts because I keep forgetting his name and I don't know why. Here we go. We're talking about the Church of St. Cuthbert. This newly built edifice was raised by the Viscount in honor of aid rendered to him by the Archcleric of Valuna in the war against the Temple of Elemental Evil. A somewhat distant cleric and his assistant officiate during services and otherwise serve their flock. In general, anyone coming to the church in other times will have to deal with the lesser cleric, the priest Calmer, and gives his stat block. For holy water can only be obtained from this location or from the trader, who's selling fake holy water. Calmer is known for his zeal in obtaining contributions. This honest man is anxious to give a sum to the builders of the fortress under construction, and although it should seem otherwise, most of the miscellaneous money for the church from characters will go towards the building of the castle. The canon, Turjan, recently became the chief cleric of the church, taking over from the canoness Ide, who left unexpectedly and has not returned. The villagers say that Turjan is not particularly friendly, and his sternness is a cause for some speculation. Admittedly, actually, the cleric is not a bad fellow at all, but he is rather displeased at being called to care for the church while Ide is on a quest. For Turjan is desirous of being off adventuring himself, and only the request of the Archcleric of Valuna keeps him on station. I note that in here it says details of the 6th level cleric Ide is given in the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons module T2, the Temple of Elemental Evil. When the temple was released, it was released as T1 through 4, which included T1, the village of Hommlet. The actual breakdown of which parts are T2, T3, and T4, not so much, not so clear. Yeah, John did burn half the village down, but it's off in the future, and well, yeah, you play your campaign as you need to. So let's see. Speaking of Giroux, while I still look for the other one, let's talk about Giroux a bit. So you have the Grove, which, as I noted, is literally right off the town square, which is kind of an interesting place for a druid grove. One would think the druid would be a little bit more remote, but Giroux takes matters seriously. The grove is obviously a place of worship. The trees are neatly pruned and the grass is well tended. A carefully placed line of bluish stone sets off the path leading to a rock cairn where flowers, nuts, Berries and garlands of leaves are placed. A small path leads beyond the shrine to a low-roofed wooden building placed under the great boughs of central oaks of the copse. A call will bring forth the druid Jaru Ashstaff. All comers to the grove are expected to make offering then and there, and the druid will so state. If the visitors are not druidical, they're expected to give several gold pieces to Jaru as donations towards the needy of Hommlet. The druid will listen to requests for assistance from those who contribute. Jaru is an agent of the druids of Gnarly Wood, sent to Hommlet to see if the Temple of Elemental Evil is totally destroyed, and to help repress any rises of evil of this sort. He'll give aid by spells, but not accompany a party. If the group is a suspicious one, Jaru will follow at a distance to see what goes on. He has a huge black bear, which is always nearby, but out of sight 95% of the time. Hidden in, and then talks about the stuff that he has hidden in his cottage. So as I was mentioning, if you're looking at the other, some of the other buildings, Area 21, a cottage and large barn. The family is a part of the congregation of St. Cuthbert. 22, mill and attached home. The followers are druidical pillars of the community and tend to be cool towards strangers. So, they're of the old faith. Then you have Area 25, large barn and connected home. As far as the owner, the herdsman, he and the druid of the grove are good friends. So, score one more for the druidical side. Area 26. These folks are followers of St. Cuthbert. So you get the idea. It's kind of bit of an even split. Perhaps more even than, one would think. But there you can definitely see they went through some detail describing who believed in what. So if you wanted to play that up a bit, it is, it's certainly there for you. There's the details that you would need to make that happen are available. And there's one more person that I wanted to bring up. And I really wish I didn't have such a hard time remembering his name. Because I kind of use him constantly. He basically takes place of every, what we call it, shows up in every time I've run the adventure. Ah, yes, Elmo. I keep forgetting that he shows up there. Elmo's an interesting character. In that one, he still lives with his parents. He is also described as his speech is described as slow and halting. So the thing with Elmo though is it's all a facade. He's described, thanks Antiquitous. In that I've played him several ways. I played him as as a character. I played him straight up appearing to be a drunk. I've played him up as potentially being a drunk, but also potentially just being being a bit slow. Whether it a couple hits to the head or some kind of injury. Turns out that Elmo is really none of those things. He depending on how you decide to go with it, he is a ranger. He's one of the first, he's one of the first NPCs that you'll probably meet who the party, theoretically, if they wanted to, they could hire him as a hireling if they had money. Or if they offered him, a bit of treasure. It's one of the things where it was not uncommon in early D&D that you would use NPCs to, party would hire people to fill in gaps, and Elmo would fill that need. Um, Another interesting thing about Elmo is one of the things he talks about is that he's got this really, really nice dagger. Uh, as he describes it, he says his brother Otis gave it to me. Um, Otis is not found in the village of Hommlet. He is elsewhere. Um, he's actually over in the next town, the town of Nob, which is described in the Temple of Elemental Evil adventure. Um, and Otis is another one, but Otis is a bit more upfront. You know, he's definitely more of the hero type. He's also doing doing serious work. Otis is also an interesting character for one other reason. Um, in in the home of Gary Gygax, Otis was actually a PC. He was a player character, played by Gary's son Luke. Otis also in as Luke's player character also met an unfortunate demise in another very, very famous module. Uh, Brownie points to the person who can name where Otis met his end. Thank you, Justinius. Yes. Gary apparently decided to, I've often made the point that the Tomb of Horrors is not an adventure that you're supposed to use as part of a campaign. It is very much a tournament module. It's the ultimate meat grinder module. You don't try. You hope to survive as long as you can, because there are many things that are deadly. And that unfortunately is where Otis met his end. But that is also how we ended up with Melf, he of the Acid Arrows. So little Greyhawk lore there, little D&D lore there. But yes, you have Elmo and his brother Otis. They also the fact that he is an agent of the Viscount of Verberbonk kind of speaks to the fact that this is a village that has it's literally more than meets the eye. To borrow these the words from the Transformers, there are things that are happening that kind of go beneath the surface, and you really can use that for building a campaign. That is I can completely believe that. Has he ever told the story of how have you ever heard him tell the story of how Melf's minute meteors was invented? Because that's a good one. I hadn't heard the acid arrow spell story, but apparently Melf's minute meteors. Um, well, let's say the old adage I don't or the old saying I didn't ask how big the room was. I said cast fireball. Well, apparently Melf did at some point and nearly ended up killing himself. I didn't think it was actually, something my morph. I didn't think it was designed. I don't. Do you have that? Where did you hear that? Because I was always under the impression it was purely meant to be a tournament module. Because that would be really, really cruel to do that as the last module of a campaign. There there are entirely there's entirely too many instant death things for that to as a player I wouldn't want that as an adventure in a campaign, because that module is out to kill you in many awful and almost punitive ways. That model could be the last campaign. Yeah, campaign because yeah, exactly. After your players throw their books at you. Uh, Actually, back then we probably would have beaten our DM with the books if they had done that to us. But since I was your room with the DM, there wasn't much of a worry of that. Um, so you mentioned Rufus being a haughty jerk. Uh, I can't even say that. That's a weird thing, Moose. It's hard to even say that because they had so many high level characters that they were using as part of the game. So many of the famous characters were high level, and they were all PCs. So I don't even know that based on when it was written. I'm not entirely sure that's even true either. But let's go, and since we were talking about Rufus, um, two other characters that became well known to the members, those of you who watch Greyhawk Awakenings Book 1, were Rufus and Byrne. Rufus and Byrne, who are in the process of building a castle. Let's see. I probably should have looked at the map before I did that, but that's okay. So let's start off with the tower itself. Uh, this tower is kind of impressive. The structure is some 55 feet high, a smaller tower rising inside the greater at about 35 feet off the ground. Its entrance is accessible only by going up a curving flight of stone stairs, which terminate in a landing about 10 feet above the ground, and you can see the picture of it in the lower right-hand corner. The outer doors of the tower lower to form a bridge to the stone landing. There are a number of arrow slits around the tower, and it has a splay around the base to about 6 feet in height. The lower and upper battlements are maculated. The merlins being pierced for archery as well. 2 men-at-arms watch from its roof. Inside dwell Rufus the fighter and Byrne the magic user. Both come to Hommlet some 3 years ago and had some considerable success in adventuring, including the defeat of a large bandit force which had plagued Verbabonk. And it is rumored that they gained considerable treasure in killing a green dragon, which preyed the Cron Hills to the west. It is well known that these two men are tough and very cautious, but willing to give some aid for a price. Rufus leads a squad of men-at-arms and has been appointed as overall commander of the village troops as well. These men are friends of all the important folk in the village. So, Byrne, his most worshipful mage of Hommlet. How's that for a title? 8th level magic user. Gotta love an 8th level magic user in first edition. 30 hit points. That's if that was specifically why he did it, as opposed to making it for a tournament adventure just for fun. I just that's one more thing. Not something I'd give a gold star for. Um, this NPC is clever and a trifle on the greedy side. All services rendered will be paid for handsomely. He's a follower of St. Cuthbert and very conscious of his duty to protect the village and to watch for evil. So any adventuring will be calculated to accomplish those ends, and pay him a third of the treasure gained as well. He's not likely to risk his life or be duped. Which is kind of interesting because, I mean, if a party is hiring if a first level party or a second level party is hiring an 8th level magic user. Yeah, I for a third of the treasure. Sure. Burn is on the young side for a magic user. Uh, Average in appearance and dress, and will often frequent the welcome wench. Let's see, Rufus. Rufus is also lawful good, and when he reaches 8th level, he has been instructed to return to Verbobank for special service in the Viscount's behalf. He will not risk his life nor become involved in foolish adventures. If he renders service to a party, he will require not less than 20% of the total treasure gained. So yeah, I can see where that kind of has him come off as a bit haughty. Sure. So what's interesting about that is they have, they've got the tower going, and around the tower, at the tower, um, you have double field stone walls filled with earth. Here are the beginnings of a smallish castle being built around a new tower atop the low mound. Workers have dug deep trench lines about 10 feet wide and deep, down to a hard clay, and it can be seen that they are in the process of mortaring the foundations of the wall, which they will build above. Work has barely begun, but the outlines of bastions, towers, and a gatehouse and a keep can be noted. The keep is atop the second hillock, and considerable excavation has taken place, the earth from this digging going to use in the walls around the hole. Some dressed stone blocks are visible, evidently having been carted from elsewhere, as they are not similar to the local stone. The whole is being financed by the Viscount and the Archclerk of Valuna for favors done by the owners of the tower, which they built as well. So, raise your hand if you have a village, if you've seen just a standard village that has a castle being built, because I consider that kind of unusual. Um, However, it does go to speak to the significance of the village of Hommlet. Um, its location to its location and proximity to the the Temple of Elemental Evil, which and the Battle of Emeraldy Meadows was fought not too far away. I think it's less than a day's journey actually, where the battle was fought. Was it some 7 years prior? Because I want to say it was fought in 569, and the standard adventure takes place in 576 common year. The forces of good and evil, the evil cultists, were routed. The temple itself was believed to have been believed to have been destroyed. As my party on Friday nights are currently finding out, that's not so much the case. But even before the Temple of Elemental Evil was released, they set the groundwork here, where you have a village where fortifications are being made. There's work being done. In the map, they even include where the workers are being located. Though actually, I think it was on two-page. This was meant to be a 2-page map, and or they just didn't scan far enough. You can see on the right-hand side, just below where the number 30 is, there's the like half circular outline of one of the hillocks. Um, there's a slight road, there's a bit of a road there that leads to where the workmen are all located. And again, it's one more section, one more thing to delve into in terms of the village of Hommlet itself. One of the things that makes it such a fascinating location is there are so many ways you can go with this. You have, you have Rufus and Burn. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's it's an interesting, really, really interesting location, and it kind of speaks to the fact that, um, it's. I speak fluent typo, so but yeah, it does kind of speak to the fact that there's more going on here than one would think if the players kind of just wandered in. And I did this with when I ran for my in-person group. None of them had ever actually done the Temple of Elemental Evil, and I decided that I wanted to run it for them. This is a group that I was playing with, friends of mine for 30 years. Been playing D&D a long time, but none of them had ever gone through the temple. So we started off on the way from the city of Verbabank, which is again not too far away, to the village, and they went on the anniversary of one of the anniversaries of the Battle of Emerald Meadows. So, it was one of those ways to give a little bit of lore, give them some appreciation for, where they are, what this place meant, and, let them live it a bit as opposed to just dropping lore on them. But you can tell just by the fact that, there's a castle being built, and the fact that Jeru himself is admittedly interested in making sure that evil doesn't return. It's a place that is doing well, but is definitely, there's definitely concerns. Um, and again, Bill the Master Crafter pointed out earlier that you did lots of side quests, and it's a town. There's a village. There's plenty of NPCs drawn up here where you can do interesting things like have side quests and let people get used to the village, so that they can ingratiate themselves with the people, become part of the town, sort of like, again, the way the player characters in Greyhawk Awakenings Book 1 did, even if that took place some 40 years in the future. It's still made for an interesting dynamic. They became part of the town, which is why when John did what he did for the finale of Book 1, or the original finale for Book 1, why it hurt so much, because these were characters that these were people that the party knew. They had become one of them. And again, you have everything here that you could want, including traders, and I say traders as in Trader, on the northern side of town, who are again also not quite what they seem. I think there's a couple of others here that are interesting, but so you have all this. Now, Pat 66 had mentioned early, talking about the Moat House, which, getting away from the village itself for a bit, is another definitely, certainly interesting location. It is not. It's how much of a journey it is. I'm not even sure it says how far it is, but there's certainly a little bit of a journey to the Moat House. The ruins of the Moat House. So, well, I'll let's read this together. This place was once the outpost of the Temple of Elemental Evil, its watchtower and advanced base for raids, looting, and destruction. From this area, servants of the temple were to bring the village of Hommlet and all the lands around it into subjection. The subjugated folk were then to be used as slaves to construct yet another fortress further west, as the evil power of the temple spread in ever-growing rings to encompass all the lands round its base. In fact, this outpost was ignored in the destruction of the temple, for the army of good which came upon the wicked hordes was so strong as to be totally immune to any pinpricking from the garrison of the Moat House. Only after the battle, which destroyed the main armies of the Temple of Elemental Evil, had had ended was attention turned towards this place. Then a detachment of horse and foot with a small siege train came to the marshlands to lay the castle low. The common folk for miles came to help, and the moat house was surrounded, cut off, and battered into extinction. The place is now shunned by the people of Hommlet, who hate its former evil and the memory of the terror brought to them by the Black Lord of the fortress, a vile cleric of damnation and his evil men and humanoid troops. A scrub of thorns, thistles, weeds, and shrubs grow thickly along the edge of the track which leads to the ruins, and even the track is mostly overgrown and cluttered with fallen branches and trees. Here and there it is washed out. In other places, a mire. Evidently, some games still follow the pathways, however, for after a mile or so, faint pathways can be seen. Even considering this, going is slow and it takes over an hour to reach the place on horseback, 2 to trudge along on foot. Okay, so it is really close. And considerable hacking and clearing is necessary to make the way passable the first time, so double the time is required. After 2 miles of distance, the land begins to sink and become boggy as the track turns more northerly, and tall marsh plants grow thickly where cattails and tamaracks do not. Off to the left can be seen the jagged silhouette of the moat house. So, yeah, you have the moat house, which, as it turns out, when the players reach Hommlet, is not quite abandoned. Either a new evil has arisen or the old evil has returned. In any case, it has it has a couple of levels to it. There's though most of the activity takes place on one particular level. If you decide to play Hommlet on its own and don't intend to do the temple proper, there's still plenty there to make it an interesting first location for the players to explore outside of the village itself, and adventure. I do recommend having them do some side quests, as Bill had mentioned, because for a first level party, this can be kind of brutal. One of the nice things about it being so close to the village of Hommlet is the fact that you can play this as a place that they kind of lay siege to. However, that also means the inhabitants, once they become aware that they're under attack, can start planning their defenses. So, it becomes a question of how fast do you want to try to get through it, and whether or not you are in the proper shape and have the proper resources to be able to do so, versus, how much warning do you want the inhabitants within to have, to make their plans, to lay their own traps. There's plenty of stuff within to kill adventurers. You give a fighting force some time, they can make the place even more defensible, which adds additional layers of intrigue. But it's a fun location. It's a great first dungeon. The dungeon ecology is a little interesting in spots. I did have a couple of questions, but all in all, it's really not the most. It's really not the worst dungeon ecology I've seen. There's still a couple of things I kind of quibble with, but it does lead to some interesting situations. Oh, for sure. You're not counting maps, 7, 8 pages of double-sided text. Yeah, absolutely. There's all kinds of room for more. There's NPCs in there that are only described but not named, so you can do with what you want. Change things up. Have put in new locations. It is one hell of a sandbox, and again, it is very close to a lot of things. So, however you want to do, or whatever it is you could possibly want to do with a starting area, um, you're supported here. There is a lot of good stuff to work with. The rest of it is just a matter of how you want to go about as a DM or as a player, how you want to go about taking advantage of it. Um, we've mentioned Rufus and Byrne. We've mentioned Elmo and his brother. We've mentioned we've talked about the Church of Saint Cuthbert. We've talked about Jaru and the Old Faith. We've talked about the inn, and we've talked again the Moat House. And I don't want to ruin the surprise for anyone who has yet to do the Moat House as to what goes within. Um, Anyone have any questions or anything that they would like to know? Yes, the beautiful one. uh, uh, I always find that one amusing. What's even more amusing is what happens when the beautiful one's defeated. But that's another story. All right. Well, that is more or less the village of Hommlet. Um, I've run this adventure in multiple formats. I actually ran this for a group of players, including Scott, better known as Wily Hobbit in the community, and a couple of his, the people from his Discord and stream, at GaryCon. We did a variation. This one is another one that was kind of a return to the Moat House. Nice, excellent. I would also point out that Goodman Games, for those of you who are interested in potentially doing this in 5e, is selling has published the Temple of Elemental Evil, where it contains not only the 5e update, but the I have seen that one. Um, I but they have done. Goodman Games did a reprint or did a version. I forgot what they call. I think it's like OAR, Original Adventures Release or re-released, where they do the 5e version of an adventure, and they did the entire Temple of Elemental Evil, including the Village of Hommlet. But it also includes a printing or as part of the book, the two books, the Village of Hommlet and Temple of Elemental Evil in first edition format as well. Um, Last check, I think it was selling for $99. At one point, it was on sale for 50% off, and I had to jump on that. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's a little hard. It can be a little hard to use in a game because those books are so thick, and there's two of them. But it's definitely. I thought it was well worth the money. It's one of the better things they did. Amazingly enough, they announced that they were doing it after I had already started my campaign for my 5e players, and it was released while we were on hiatus because of the pandemic. So I finally, about a month ago, I finally got to use it for the first time. That was pretty cool. But yeah, this is the Village of Hommlet. If you have the chance, I highly recommend. I highly recommend either if you're a DM and you're looking for something to use for new players, getting your hands on it. You can get it from a drive-through RPG in PDF format, um, or find it some other way. But and if you have the chance to play in it, it's a wonderful place to play. I, I would highly recommend taking advantage of that chance, and I'll probably do it again at some point. So um, it's kind of hard to do as a one shot. I might consider doing it as like a four shot or maybe a 6 shot, so that players have some time to dig in. but we'll see. It's a thought I've had, just so more people can experience what I think again is one of the best adventures, page for page, that D&D has ever produced. So, that being said, again, I want to thank everyone for spending some time with me this evening. Um, uh, I'm glad to see so many people on. I'm glad to see so many people here who were down in Tennessee for the weekend for Blue Box Con. It was a pleasure to get a chance to speak and play with you all. As always, for those of you who are not able to make it, I hope you are able to make it next year. You were definitely missed. I mean, that it would be awesome. In a perfect world, we'd be able to find a way to get everybody there, but unfortunately, this is many things. A perfect world is not one of them. Um, so, we here at Blue Box, well, we do have a question for you. If you've been watching and enjoying the content that has been, on your screen, these, tonight and these past days, but you have not yet followed, follow is free. Just saying, little button, lower right hand corner. Or if you're a follower, but you have not yet subscribed, and if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you do have a free sub that you can grace some lucky channel with. Or if you are a subscriber, but your sub has lapsed, goodness gracious me. Or you're all of the above, but you're any of the above, and you have not yet joined our Discord. Queuing Manda for the Discord. We have one question for you. What are you doing? Give us a follow, give us a sub, or join the Discord, hang out, chat. We'd love to have you. We're glad you're here. We hope you've been enjoying this, and hopefully next week we will be returning with our regularly scheduled cast. John and Vivi should hopefully both be back next week. So I'm not entirely sure what we're running yet, but we'll find something. Oh, wait a second. I believe next week I may not be here next week, because I think next week I'm not sure if next week is the romance stream. Man, do you remember if it's next week, or is that in June? Thanks, Trey. I really appreciate that. And hearing from the guy with the collection, that's awesome. Oh, next week is June. No, next week is the 31st. I had to check that. I couldn't remember how many days there were in May. I know there's 30 in June. Well, the 30th is a cosplay, but I'm talking the 31st. Is that when the romance stream is? There we go. Blue Box Bells. So all the ladies will be talking about romance in your D&D campaigns or one shots and so on and so forth. That should be a fun one. Based on how the first one went, which unfortunately I was on the road for. But so tune in next week for all that. And after running solo tonight, I get the night off. Well, other than modding. So yeah, have a great evening, everyone. We need to find somebody to raid into, because I do believe Lord Gazumba is off this week. So, who can we raid into? That's a good question. You know something? Yeah, he's still painting. Yeah, something. I know John normally likes to run to paint, going to somebody who is doing D&D, but Mike Disney is such a valued member of this community, and it'd be nice to show him some love. So if you could all just hang around until the raid happens, we will raid into Mike Disney. All right. And with that, we are raiding in 3, 2, 1. Have a great night, everyone. See you on the other side.